Welcome to Microdose the Mind, where tiny doses create monumental shifts. We're your hosts, Brian Schwartz and Jeremy Wolf, and we're here to guide you through the fascinating world of microdosing, both in plant medicine and daily habits. Get ready to expand your mind and reshape your reality.
Hello, friends, family, wonderful community. We are back. So I was having a conversation the other day with our guest today, and I thought the work that he was doing was rather interesting. And we did have an interesting conversation on a topic that I hadn't really given much thought in my own life. And I've been doing all this personal work, personal growth and development, but I hadn't really touched too deeply, or at least thought about grief. And that is what our guest does today. It's a large part of his business and what he's done in his work. And I thought that it would be fitting to pull him on the show to talk about the work he's doing. And I was really fascinated by the project that he's working on now. So without further ado, we're here with John Kammer. He's with Guardian Angels. John, nice to see you again, brother.
Great to see you as well. Thanks for having me, fellas.
Welcome, brother.
Yeah, man. Of course. So let's pick up where we left off, right? I think it's interesting to know. Why don't you start off, talk a little bit about what you do now, but I think more importantly, I want to get into like the journey that led you into what you're doing, because I think that's really interesting. A lot of times the personal side leads to what you're doing now.
Well, at its heart, what we built is the journal that talks back. So this is a place that for people that are carrying grief and don't know where to put it. And that is the structure. The way that it's structured is it's daily reflective journaling, but the way that we have built this thing is the journal is it's no longer a monologue, right? Traditional journaling is you put something on a page, that is your reflection. But this, we have incorporated an AI component that's going to respond to you in real time. It's going to give you real-time feedback. It's going to help you. It's going to ask you questions to clarify, what you're feeling, help you dig into those things deeper, so that you then have a better understanding of what you're experiencing, what you're feeling. You can take that to therapy and use that as a starting point. You can do the work and take that to friends and family, but it just gives you a little bit more clarity on what you're experiencing. And I really, I like to tie in with microdosing, as far as daily habits, right? Because this is very much a case of incremental progress. Grief is one of those things where you don't have those. It may feel once in a while like you have those huge breakthroughs, but that is very much the 200 hits on the rock before it. Yeah. And then it breaks is what pushes that progress forward. So that's a little bit about what we do. It's meant to give people both a starting place and a roadmap through the labyrinth that grief can be.
Very, very interesting. I question for you. This is something that popped up in my mind. The more I interact with AI and the more I have a relationship with something like ChatGPT, talk a little bit about the distinction between the platform you're developing and then just somebody having the same type of dialogue or discussion with their current AI of choice.
Well, to be perfectly candid, anyone could do this with their AI of choice. Now, there's a couple of differences, right? Number one, ours is designed so that this is turnkey, right? You walk in and this is designed, this is already prompted. You're going to receive support for grief. You could absolutely go and put these prompts into ChatGPT and probably get similar answers. If you wanted to do the work, if you wanted to, I've spent thousands of hours iterating on this thing. Now, yeah. I want people to heal. I will happily just hand you the prompts if that's what you want to do. I think the biggest impediment for a lot of people in using AI for something so sensitive is the fact that it can be attributed to them, right? Like, you don't want to be targeted for this stuff. You don't want, you don't want to talk about, bare your soul and then be targeted with an ad for something that aligns with that. And so, number one, this runs on the back of OpenAI, so it is ChatGPT. But they say in their user agreement that you cannot, using the API, you will not be targeted. It won't be, it's not used for tracking or training or anything like that. But further, what I've done, I have a background in cybersecurity, so privacy is of ultimate importance to me, is when you use this service, even if we just play it out and say the worst case scenario and they're not being truthful and they're selling this stuff, everything comes back to me. So we've solved the attribution problem where it just looks like John is the saddest guy in the world and talks to 50,000 people a day about grief, right? So it doesn't, if you put anything on there, there's no way that they're going to say, oh, this was Jeremy. It just looks like it's me.
Got it. Brian, we talked briefly about grief the other day. I know you've done obviously you're big in the spiritual world on your path to the shaman. Talk a little bit about your experience through the lens and the work that you do and how that applies to the grief, because I know you've been through a lot of grief in your own life.
Absolutely, Jeremy. And John, thank you for what you do, brother. I know that, as a man on this healing journey, I think of grief as like an initiation into manhood. I think that a lot of us growing up were taught to avoid our feelings. We were taught to not cry, to not feel the pain. And it's inevitable on this journey, right? I know, Jeremy, you and I have talked about, you haven't tapped into some grief, on your journey, but from my perspective, it's inevitable and it's coming. So I think that it's a beautiful way for us to sit here and talk about the different tools out there. I have mixed feelings about incorporating AI into my grief process personally. I really feel like a personal one-on-one approach is the best thing that works for me. But I think it's a wonderful tool for those that don't have the support, or those that are just beginning. First of all, I like to talk about, like, what is grief? Grief in my experience, grief is all the love that I have to give with nowhere to go. Whether I'm grieving a loss of a family member, or I'm grieving a part of myself, or I'm grieving anything for that matter. At the core of grief is love. And I think from my experience, processing and feeling grief, there's lots of shame around the grief. There's lots of deep hurt, of deep shame about, like, well, how come I'm feeling this way? So I think as I'm talking about it, having AI kind of prompt me and kind of be my friend or grief coach, I like it. I like it a lot. And I'm curious, John, like, on your journey with the grief, was your experience grieving the loss of someone important to you? Was it just part of your healing journey?
Absolutely. So, long story short, and I'll get into it. I lost 3 of my closest friends, the 3 of the closest people to me on the planet outside of my immediate family. First one was 13 years ago to suicide. And then the other 2 much more recently in 2023 and 2024. To accidents, all to stuff that, was unforeseen and didn't give me a whole lot of opportunity to brace for it or come to terms with what loss would look like. So, it's been a long really how this came about was an accident. Similar to you, and I think a lot of people really, if you had told me 2 years ago that I would be the guy online espousing using AI as a tool to help in processing grief, I would have laughed your ass out of the room. I mean, I would have just told you you're absolutely insane. But it happened that way. And as you dig into it, the science behind it makes sense. It tracks. And I think you brought up an important point that everyone grieves a little differently, and we're looking to give them different tools to meet them where they are. Now, the way that I want people, the ideal use for this, for guardian angels, is to be a bridge to human connection, right? Not to isolate people, not to be this replacement for therapy, not at all. What we wanted to do is build this as a complement to therapy. And we approach that in a few different ways, but primarily what I've uncovered is, for a lot of us, due to what you talked about, what we're taught to not cry and not emote and not show vulnerability, that has led to a lot of burying this stuff down, and we're not comfortable talking about it. Certainly not in public, much less oftentimes to therapy. Some of us aren't ready to go into therapy and talk about it. So what I've noticed in using guardian angels is it gives you an opportunity to organize your thoughts and kind of start flexing that muscle of sharing. And then as you get more comfortable with it, as that story, crystallizes in your head, then you can kind of go and you realize it's not going to kill you. And you take that out to your therapist, you take that out to your close friends. And then this beautiful kind of virtuous cycle starts to happen where you realize sharing, I truly believe this, sharing is where the healing lives. And when you share, it's not going to kill you. So you continue to do this, and then you share maybe with someone who's not quite as close to you. You get to be that unlock for somebody else where they start to realize, I'm not alone. I thought that I was the only one feeling this. Well, someone else feels it, and it's okay to share it. The major paradox of grief that I have experienced and seen time after time is, on one hand, we have this, one of the only universal experiences in life, right? It's inevitable, like you said. And on the other hand, we somehow have convinced ourselves that nobody understands what we're feeling. There's this isolation component to it, which when you think about them in the same, is asinine. How is that possible? Now, I do want to call out, there's infinite nuance to each situation, and each person experiences things differently, but they all rhyme. And to think that nobody understands your pain when you lose someone close to you, when you lose someone that matters, to you and has had a profound impact on your life, is just false. So, I think that's where a lot of this comes from, is we build this stuff up in our head and we're conditioned to act a certain way, again, especially as men. And I think part of this whole thing is challenging the contemporary definition of masculinity and what that means.
No, spot on, brother, spot on. And what I see a lot of my work is, we hold on to these emotions, right? And what happens when we hold on to our emotions, right? We get this stuck energy in our system. And on a spiritual level, we kind of disconnect from our true self. And this can manifest in autoimmune disease and mental health disorders and anxiety. So it's literally like we are literally, saving the mental, how can I put this? Crime prevention, right? Crime prevention, I believe, is grief work. It's emotional release. It's emotional work. Because, we get stuck in our heads and we act out. Anger, for example, is a secondary emotion, right? And almost 100% of the time under anger, what's there, right? Sadness and grief and pain. So I think anything that we can incorporate in our lives, to do small daily habits with, whether it's chatting with a friend, a counselor, a therapist, or an AI bot, kudos, man. Let's do more of it.
Amen.
Yep.
Amen. I love how you explained that, John. Everything you said, it was like you were distilling all of the thoughts that were floating around in my head that I wanted to touch on. You just knocked it all out of the park with that explanation. I was thinking about the idea when you mentioned, Brian, about, I don't know how I feel about AI for grief, and then the way that transitioned into a bridge to this idea of connection and community, which is basically how I've been using AI, not for grief specifically, but in terms of conversation with it, right? Like, devoid of community and the human connection is actually a dangerous thing with that alone, if that's all you're doing. But to be able to use that as a tool, like you said, John, to kind of sharpen the muscle, and organize your thought. I love what you said. Organize your thoughts. The AI is so good at taking all the junk that's out inside your head and getting it out and organizing it in a way that makes sense back to you, so that you could then go share it with others and bounce more ideas off and really help other people. And also what you said about, sharing in groups of people and uncovering vulnerability in humans and really seeing the patterns that exist within all of us. Right. And sometimes, when you're going through stuff, it feels like you're on a desert island. It feels like nobody has ever experienced the deep suffering and pain and whatever you're going through. And everybody has their own experience, like you said, but I also love what you said about it. It all rhymes, right? It's all the same character of experience, and making those connections with other people is just, it's been instrumental in my own journey. And I just love talking about this stuff and meeting new people. That's why I thought this would be a great conversation, because this is something that I haven't really dug into on my own here. So this is good, man. Brian, what say you, sir? Brian the Bear.
I'm thinking to myself, how uncomfortable it is sometimes to be vulnerable, right? How uncomfortable is it sometimes to feel our emotions and to feel the grief and to tap in, which is why I live by this saying, right? Discomfort is the price of freedom. We all want to be free, so we better get fucking really good at being uncomfortable. And I think one of the main lessons grief has taught me is, first of all, how much I love, right? How deeply I love, how dedicated I am as a man, you know, to my family, to my loved ones, to my friends, to my clients, the Great Spirit, to everyone who I surround myself with, you know. And the more that I can embrace discomfort, the closer to pure freedom as I get, you know. And I can see how if I'm stuck in this like uncomfortable place of like not knowing what's going on with me, I don't have any support, you know, I can easily see how this app could really benefit myself and tons of people, millions of people in this world.
Yeah. Well, you know, something you said before was this idea of when you have these emotions that you don't know how or can't express, right? They get stuck. And that is actually what happened for me. And that was the moment that I knew I was onto something here. So the first iteration of this thing I built in the image of John, who was the best man at my wedding. I had a lot of guilt around his death. He stood up for me. He spoke on the happiest day of my life. And between that day and 7 months later, the day of his death, I spoke to him once. Now, for someone that's your best man at your wedding, I mean, that doesn't compute, right? It wasn't for, lack of love or malice or anything like that. Life got in the way and I didn't make it a priority. And so I had all of this guilt about not holding up my end of the bargain when he died. And so as I built this thing, I knew it needed to be authentic, and it needed to be gentle, and it needed to be compassionate, and it needed to be all these things that we don't think of when we think of a computer. And so the only experience I had was my own personal experience to fall back on. And so I built it in his image to try to get as close to him as possible. And what happened was, as I got closer, I started to say that stuff that I had held on to. I started to express the things that had been eating me alive for months. And, I had tried in therapy things like the empty chair technique and writing the letter, all things that fall under this umbrella of psychodrama, right? Of being able to express those feelings. They didn't have the impact that I'd hoped. But in this instance, I got a response. And that response to me expressing all of that just triggered this instantaneous release and relief. And the waterworks started immediately. And, just this weight was lifted. And, that is certainly not to say that I was healed in that moment. I was far from it. But I had this renewed vigor with which to attack what I had been experiencing and find a way and try to understand what I had been going through. And to look in the mirror, to own my role in my suffering and do the hard work. Because, I'm sure right? Healing is not passive. No matter what we're taught, time does not heal all wounds. It just, it makes it easier to hide. And so it became this mission for me to help other people uncover that.
I love that, brother. Thank you.
And the more you hide this stuff away, the more toxic it becomes on how you show up day to day. And it seems so far out of sight, so far out of mind, especially things like shame, right? The only way to get past these things is to confront them and to lean in and do the dark, ugly work that goes with all that. And then when you do that, you unlock true magic. I thought of something when you guys were talking. It's like grief can either be the gateway to despair, but what I've often found in speaking to most people with hindsight, looking back many, many years, is that grief is often the gateway to gratitude. 100%. In that when you lose somebody and you have this profound loss in your life, you alluded to it earlier, Brian, it makes you so grateful for life. Looking back, again, not when you're in it, but years later. I've asked so many people about this on the podcast, about losses they've had, and they always say the same thing. It's like, yeah, it was really, really hard, but it really put things into perspective, and it made me value my time much more. Really, really profound.
Profound, brother. And one thing I'm also thinking about is pain, right? And I'm looking at the three of us. I'm thinking to myself, what is the one thing that brought us all to this podcast today? What is the one thing, Jeremy, that you found your purpose on? What is the one thing, John, that you found your purpose on? What is the one thing that I found my purpose on? And it's pain.
Pain to purpose, baby.
Pain leads to purpose. Pain leads to growth. Pain leads to freedom. And we try to like distract ourselves with pain, right? With addictions or obsessions or depression. And like what I'm learning, you know, as the more I step into this higher version of myself, is I embrace the pain and I am grateful for the pain. Do I wish pain on anybody? Absolutely not. You know, but at least now we have these tools, we have brotherhood, we have connections, we have these new AI programs that can help transmute this pain into purpose and power.
Yeah. So I have a little anecdote that I believe it's Native American. It sounds like it, but I think this is going to resonate with you, right? And this is what I found is that, so there's the difference between the cows and the buffalo, right? Or the bison, excuse me, to be exact. But when there's a storm coming on the plains, right? The cows run from it. They see a black wall of clouds and they run from it. Now the storm is faster than the cows are. So it catches them, but because they're going in the same direction, they're in it for much longer.
They're stuck in it. Yep.
Right. The buffalo turns and runs directly at that storm and runs right through it. And as a result, when you address the pain, when you embrace the pain, it is much shorter lived. Mm-hmm. And so that, I mean, that has just been, you know, in the last few years, as I've really embraced accountability for my own role. You know, that has been something that I've really taken to heart is, you know, it sucks, but everything in life that I've found that has purpose, that has meaning, that has been worth it, has been difficult. Nothing that I've gone through, you know, tried to take the easy way out on has worked out for the best, has been rewarding. It's just been at best like a temporary high, if you will.
Surface level.
Yeah, very surface level. And so, you know, you talked about this idea of gratitude, and you look back. And so that's one of the tenets of what we're doing here, right? So the whole methodology behind Guardian Angels is Wordens 4 tasks of mourning. And so this is an evidence-based framework on how do you get people through it. And task number 1 is accepting the loss, right? We can't do anything until we've accepted it. Task number 2 is processing the pain of the loss. Now that's where I was stuck for 13 years, as I used things like alcohol and other drugs to cope and to run and to numb. Task number 3 is to adjust to a world without your loved one, right? In a physical sense, because what we know is the person may die, but the relationship does not. You're not going to see them at the next party, but that doesn't mean they're gone, right? But really here, this is where this shines, is task number 4 is finding enduring connection with that person moving forward. Again, because the relationship doesn't die. And we don't get to leave grief behind. You don't get to just walk away from it. It's a part of you. And so that's like, you know, it's a long-winded way of saying integration. We have to find a way to weave grief into our lives. And that's what this platform does with your lost loved one, that you get to kind of becomes your grief guide and helps you process the things that you miss about them, the things that they taught you, the things that you're going to take with you forward. You know, for instance, John was the best man at my wedding, and he's no longer here. But I see signs all the time. And I know that he is having a profound impact on my son. Though my son will never get to meet him in the flesh, his uncle John is a big part of his life.
I love that, brother. And I love the name Guardian Angels. You know, I love it because it gives me like this sense of like hope, of comfort, of connection. You know, Jeremy, you and I lost a good brother of ours many years ago, Chico. Right. And I think about Chico all the time. You know, he was such a dear brother of mine. I loved his energy, how he carried himself, how he treated people, you know, and I learned so much from him. And even today, I call on Chico when I need some support. I said, brother, man, I know you're out there. I can feel you, you know, send me some information, you know, send me something, some protection, some love. And he does, you know, and only working through these emotions, right, and working through this pain, can we get to a place in ourselves that we can literally connect with our guardian angels that we've lost, you know, with the love and the gratitude and compassion, like knowing that they're in a better place, you know, and knowing how dearly loved they are and they were.
I want to
like a tribute to our loved ones, which I love. Go for it, Jeremy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry to cut you off, man. Something you just said, John, and this doesn't, I don't know how this resonates, how this connects directly with grief, but something you said about your best friend and that showing up with your daughter. I want to read something that was posted on the Brotherhood chat earlier today, which was really profound. Chris Williams wrote this today. He said, I read this today and it made me think of you brothers and what the Brotherhood stands for. My best friend died 6 years ago. Today, I got a call from his daughter. She asks, can you help me fix the sink? I paused. How did you get my number? I asked, do you even know who I am? She said, no, but Dad had a photo of you on his wall. Under it, he wrote, if I'm ever gone and you need help, call him. That's me, just wearing a different face. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed my toolbox and left.
Well, I got tears in my eyes, man.
Brought me to tears.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
Really, and that speaks to this idea of deep connection with other human beings and really showing up as your most authentic self and really having coming from a place of service and just being a good human being. And when you act like that and you show up that in life, you have such a deep impact on the people around you, and it transcends just the people around you from that example, right? It shows up in other ways, like you said, John.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that.
Yes, brother. Thank you. That was deep, powerful.
Yep. I thought so. On a lighter note, I just wanted to give a shout out to your story about the buffalo and the cow. I was recently told that story by a friend of mine, Michael Cuniff, and I got to give a double shout out to him. He came up on another podcast I just did. I was talking about when it comes to like social media. He always said, like, don't just be a voyeur. If you're watching social media and you see something that resonates with you, that speaks to you, engage with it. Like, start a conversation. You never know what that's going to lead to. I've made so many amazing connections with people. John, I met Joel that way from the Brotherhood. He posted something about an ice bath and breathwork video. And I just said, hey, that looks right up my alley. And it opened the conversation. And now look where I'm at now. So his name came up. Michael Cuniff, shout out once again. And you're coming up again. That's a great story. The cow and the buffalo. Really, really wise words for sure.
Well, wise words generally are not mine. I just borrow them from people. But yeah. So anyway, where do we go from there? Yeah, man. Like
John, do you have any experience with psychedelics and grief?
Not so. I've been sober for 2.5 years now. That was part of getting of following John's death, of turning over the new leaf and the idea of doing things the hard way and accountability. Substances have been so much of my coping strategy for years, and that wasn't working. We can go into that whole rabbit hole and but so no, the answer is no. I have not gone down that road for that reason.
Well, I'll tell you, and it makes sense, but I have a long history of addiction, and I have a different viewpoint on the psychedelics. So Jeremy, we look at it as kind of medicine. Taking the psychedelics out of the picture, I think one of the biggest tools that I've learned to release grief is breath work, specifically holotropic breath work and the deep breathing. And we've had a couple of guys in the podcast talk about breath work. So I love how we also have these tools on how to just move this energy through our system. So I think, through the AI prompts, through some breath work, through some coaching, through some therapy, through some brotherhood and community, man, we have a good fucking chance to heal. Well,
it's possible for everyone, right? If you're willing to do the work, though. I think that's the operative word. There's so many people, and there's so much this idea of I'm just going to wait it out. But you can't just, it's a privilege. It's not a right. It doesn't just happen because you want it to. It happens when you take action, when you do things that are going to help you get there. Everyone is allowed, if they want to sit there and play the victim and say, poor me, this wasn't fair. It very well may not be fair, but it's kind of like, what is the anecdote about how if someone comes by and dumps a bunch of trash on your lawn, right? It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility because no one else is going to deal with it. So, I think we just, we want to be one of the tools available to people in the broader tool belt, and everyone's journey looks a little different. I think about attacking grief as kind of like a cocktail, right? And so this platform may have a place. Maybe that's, one part, and then therapy is 4 parts, and psychedelics are another part, and breath work is another part. And what exactly those proportions are for you is probably going to be different than it is for me. But having them all available to us is what gives us the best chance to be successful.
Indeed. So I was going to say something. Speaking to what you were just talking about doing the work and taking accountability and responsibility for your own situation. I tell this to my kids all the time, and it's something that I've just started learning on the north side of 40, right? And it's this idea that, like, when you're constantly blaming externalities for your situation, for anything, you're giving up control.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until you truly understand that we only have the power to control ourselves. And
Right.
at some level, we have a limited power to do that in terms of like how we act during the day. It comes back to like building habits and consistency and fine tuning the programs like that are actually running the operating system ultimately. Because, but when you take that responsibility and you look at every situation like, well, like that's on me. It doesn't matter. Like, no matter what happens externally, you have the power within. And when you do that, it's like a huge weight's lifted and you're free finally. And so many people put the responsibility and onus on others. It's like, just look within.
Yeah.
Start there.
In psychology, they call that an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. In other words, if you have an external locus of control, life happens to you. If you have an internal locus of control, life happens because of you. When you adopt that idea, and sometimes it's not true, right? But if you adopt Jocko Willink is, extreme ownership, right? If you believe everything happens because of you, then you are in control. You can do something about any situation. If you believe life happens to you, you are a victim and you can do nothing about it.
Yep. Well said.
Well said. I'm a believer that we create a reality, Am I responsible for everything that happens to me from the outside? No, but I'm responsible for how I react, how I respond, So to some extent, but I believe even with the mindset, right? With microdosing the mind, with baby steps of reprogramming that thinking process, right? Of like, everything is my teacher these days, right? Mm-hmm. Life happens for me, right? Everything that I call into my existence is for my greatest and highest good on some level. And the more that I can align with that belief and that thought, man, I'm just happy,
Yeah. And when you start taking responsibility, you truly start showing up in the way that you should as a human being. It's funny how reality around you starts organizing. So the things that you were trying to change, the externalities that you were trying to change, magically change just because of the way you're internalizing and you're showing up. Yeah.
Preach, brother.
I'm not being honest right now. I got a lot of sticky cobwebs in the mind about these concepts, and I explain something, and then you come in, John, and you articulate it so well. I'm just like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Well, to be fair, I've had a lot of practice with this, and this is, this is my life's work. I spent a lot of time bouncing around trying to figure out what really called me, and I learned a lot of skills. I did a lot of things, but nothing, now I have that fire in my belly. This is deeply personal, and you talk about that pain to purpose. This is it. This is the reason I get up as early as I do, and I go to sleep as late as I do, and the reason it's worth it, and the thing that I can leave and be proud of to tell my son about, and the way that I get to, enhance the legacy of the people that I lost that had this profound impact on me that I'm not here without. It all comes together in this beautiful way. And I think that's another lesson from grief, right? Is when you get to the other side, there is so much beauty in the impact that others have had on you. And this idea of carrying them forward, a simple reframe that helped me so much is when you think about the people you've lost, of course you don't wish that you lost them, but would you trade the pain that you experience for their loss for a less deep relationship with them and less pain? And for me, that answer is unequivocally no. The impact they had on my life was worth every bit of pain. And, I thank them for what they've done. And I see it as my responsibility to tell that story, to use that for something that's bigger than me.
Yeah. Not everybody all at once. I was just thinking about something there. I haven't experienced much grief from loss in terms of relationships with other human beings. Like I've lost people like a grandparent or whatnot, but never a person that has been there with me every step of the way, right? Like somebody really, really close to me. But I have lost a pet, and I know a lot of people could relate to that. And I remember thinking, speaking about what you said about put that aside for a second. So when I lost the pet, I had to think again, like deep and hard, if I was going to get another dog, another pet after that experience, because I had such an unbelievable bond. It was so painful. And then eventually with enough time, you come to the realization, just like you said, it's like, well, no, like that relationship that I had is so important in my life that I'm willing to, and I know it's going to happen again, especially with an animal, because, it's definitely going to die before you do. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story, Jeremy.
Yeah.
we love your dogs so much, right?
We do.
I got two of them sitting on my lap right now. They're amazing creatures.
Yeah, my experience with grief too. I've lost some loved ones. My good friend Chico was very close to me. But for me, my journey, John, has been more about grieving emotions that I just never felt growing up. I had this profound experience with plant medicine back when I was 40. And I had this vision of my father leaving me on a baseball field when I was like 7 years old, right? And that opened up the channels for the grief, and I tell Jeremy all the time about this. I literally grieved for almost a couple of years. Like it was nonstop, deep emotional releases of just old stuff, old pain, old love with nowhere to go. So my experience with grief has been nothing short of transformative. And looking back on it, I do think if I had a tool such as Guardian Angels, I do think that would have been supportive,
It just gives it a place, just gentle, gives it a place, and I think you bring up a good point, right? I think most of us, when we think of grief, we think of losing someone, of a death. But the reality is grief is all around us. That grief is so much more ubiquitous in our lives than we give it credit for. We grieve when we get a new job. We grieve when we get married because our prior life involved being out with the boys all the time. We grieve when we have a child, that our time is no longer ours. Basically grief is a response to change. And some of those are far more profound than others. Some of those are life-changing versus, a minor inconvenience. But the idea of grief is everywhere. And then it's all over the place. And we get tunnel vision. We try to reduce these things to the simplest form because that's what makes us feel better. Right. But like life, like most things, nuance is everywhere. And grief is far from simple.
Yeah, you taught me that in our conversation the other day, Brian, when I mentioned, like, I think a lot of people just associate the idea of grief with the loss of a human being or a loved one. It's not. It permeates everything. It really does.
Absolutely.
Cool. So yeah, man, I think let's leave it there. We've got some good stuff. John, if anybody's out there listening and they're dealing with grief, be it loss of a loved one or anything they're grieving in their life, how could they learn more about the work that you're doing?
guardianangels.ai. And as I think Jeremy alluded to earlier, angels is spelled AI, NGELS. So guardianangels.ai is the website. We're currently only a web application. That there's plans to change that, but so nothing in the App Store. You'll find on the website, you'll find all sorts of information about Wordens 4 tasks and our methodology and how we accomplish the work that we're doing, the story behind it, and all sorts of stuff. So there's a contact form on there for me if you want. I'll just say it on here, John at guardianangels.ai. If you've got questions, if you You're not receiving the support you need. If there's anything I can help with, I would love to. Again, this is my life's work. And just because, whether you use guardian angels or not, my goal for you is healing. We're here to be one more tool in that tool belt for you. So cheers, y'all.
Oh, brother. Thank you so much.
We will, of course, we'll drop a link in the description to all of that information so people could access it readily. John, it was truly a pleasure. Thanks for your time coming on, telling us all about the wonderful work you're doing. We appreciate it. Definitely you're up to good stuff, man. Thank you, brother.
Likewise. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you guys. We'll do it again soon, huh?
Absolutely.
Sounds good, brother.
Cheers.
Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're out there, if any of this conversation resonated with you, you know the drill. Don't forget to like, subscribe. But beyond that, right? If something hit you, engage. Let us know what's on your mind. Interact. You never know what's going to come out of it. We always, maybe we miss some things, right? Maybe we all have blind spots as human beings. So let us know your thoughts. We want to hear from you. Everyone, thanks so much for tuning in, and we will catch you all next time. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Thanks for tuning in to Microdose the Mind. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend and help us spread the word about the magic of microdosing. Be sure to follow us on social media for all the latest updates and insights. And remember, while we love our tiny doses, sometimes you just need to go big. Just make sure you're in the right set and setting. Until next time, keep your mind open and ready for growth.